Hello, greetings. This is Jeffrey Chen. Presentation of the capstone project for 779, and I hope everyone's healthy and sheltering in place and doing well. So here we go. Online instruction to aid English language learners in 10th grade chemistry. So here's our table of contents. You'll see we'll talk about the statement of problem. We'll talk about the research hypothesis. We'll go over the literature review, which was pretty good. Then we'll get to the method action plan, and you can see what we're going to talk about here, A through E. And then the discussion that we'll talk about my results. Okay. So statement of the problem. Here's something that I've been struggling with for a while, and it's as a 10th grade chemistry teacher, I've experienced ELLs struggle more and receive lower grades than non-ELLs. Basically, I feel chemistry is a difficult subject for all students to grasp. Being an EL puts this population at an even greater disadvantage. I think providing my students with multimedia instruction in their own native language, which is the majority of Spanish, could help increase overall understanding of chemistry and lessen that divide. I'm hoping. Let's see. So here's my research hypothesis. Does flipping the 10th grade chemistry classroom increase general knowledge and understanding for English language learners? Let's see. So here's a little overview of the literature. ELLs often perform double the work of native English speakers in high school because, of course, they have to simultaneously learn the new language and then also the new academic language. And as you might know, chemistry is in itself a language unlike any other. And also here, English language learners often don't have sufficient knowledge of academic English and science to benefit from science instruction provided in English. And here, this is interesting. It takes 7 to 10 years to develop the cognitive academic language proficiency to learn successfully in a second language. I did not know that, but it's very true. I'm learning Spanish now, and it's incredibly difficult. So here, as of 2015, California emergent bilingual students comprise over 22% of the K-12 public school population and represent over 60 language groups. And this is important here, 60 language groups, because it's going to be very difficult for teachers to provide information in each person's, language. So the multimedia will help us. Let's see what we got next. Flipping the classroom, which I love. I love flipping the classroom. I just got introduced to it through this master's program, and I'm enamored by it. So flipping the classroom is pedagogically favorable because it emphasizes constructivism, which is super important. Personalized, differentiated learning, and student-centered instruction. That's super important too, student-centered instruction. Online learning supports the cognitive affective theory of multimedia learning. It borrows principles from dual coding theory, cognitive load theory, and of course back to the constructivist learning theory. And from our own professor here at San Diego State, an effective way to ensure culturally relevant teaching is to provide the educational material in the student's native language. Super important. Here we go, the method and action plan. So here's the general breakdown of my I have 94 students. You can see here in the flipped classroom, which for me is period 2, I have a total of 14 English language learners. And you can see here, and then the traditional lecturing is going to span 2 periods, period 1 and 3, and that's going to be 17 English language learners. So here's our 2 groups. I've got 14 people in period 2, which are English language learners, and then in period 1 and 3, I've got 17. So that's the breakdown. The instruments that we're going to use, I did a pre-test exam, which in chemistry is I don't feel it's very smart because not many people know chemistry. So giving a pre-test in chemistry is giving someone like a pre-test in Greek. It's just, they're not going to know. So you can imagine that there's going to be a very wide range of scores, but you're going to like my results. So we did a pre-test exam, we did a unit exam. So it was a 6-week prepared curriculum on behavior of gases, that's periods 1 and 3. And then the 6-week flipped curriculum online, that's period 2. Research design. So it was a quasi-experimental because there was no random assignment. Of course, I couldn't choose. There's one experimental group which received flipped design, that's period 2. And then I have 2 control groups, periods 1 and 3, and they received traditional lecture, of course, me standing at the whiteboard or the Promethean board and doing my thing. We have a pre-test, post-test design only, and then the experiment spanned a 6-week lesson, and all we did was the behavior of gases. Okay, that's one of my units in chemistry. So the threats to the validity. History. Unfortunately, I had 2 unplanned fire drills in period 1, so they got taken out of class and almost took up the whole period. And then period 3 had 1 pep rally, of course, because they're right before lunch. So, because my 4th period is an open period. So, so testing, I have a pre-test and post-test familiarity. You know, that's where if they get the same test twice, then they can kind of get to know the answers. The instrumentation, I had 3 separate exams because my students love, first period loves to tell second and third period what's on the test. And sometimes they might snap a photo of the exam. So I have many tests. So that's the instrumentation. Statistical regression, there's some true-false questions and multiple choice on all of the exams. So that someone could guess correctly. And then selection, there was no random sampling or random assignment. I chose everything. Threats to validity external. So interaction effective testing, group B is the experimental group, and they could try harder as part of this research project because they knew they were the experimental group. And group A know that they are the control group, so that's the unintended control effect. Multiple treatment interference. Some students receive help from knowledgeable parents or tutors. Some of my students, their parents purchase tutors for them so that they can study because you know their education is really important, and some don't. So not all students have equal access to extra help, so that affects the multiple treatment interference. Procedure. So the research was conducted from January to mid-March. I did it right after the Christmas break. Pre-test given to all 3 groups to assess prior knowledge. And then group A is the traditional lecture. Group A is going to be periods 1 and 3. And then group B was period 2. So they started flipping the classroom. As I said earlier, 6 weeks of instruction on the behavior of gases. And 1 summative assessment is the end of the unit exam. And then we have analyzed data. Okay, so the results. The traditional lecture control group increased 11.2 points from the pre-test to the end of the unit's test. And the flipped classroom, this is important, they increased 22.7 points from the pre-test to the end of the unit test. And these are the ELLs we're talking about, okay? So the ELLs, we show a marked improvement in their general understanding. The ELLs, the flipped classroom. So here's our graph of control group. This is periods 1 and 3. You can see their pre-test scores, which are the purple, and then their post-test or end of the unit exam is going to be in orange. So you can see there's marked improvement, just vast improvement here, and that's double. So, and here's the experimental group. So here you can see already that we have much larger differences in pre-test to post-test. Our end of unit exam. So here we have the points earned. Some of them only got 1 or 2 points on the pre-test because they didn't know any information at all. Now here's the culminating, the meat and potatoes. So here we have the mean score. So a 2.9 mean score for the flipped guys, the ELLs, and then their post-test, their mean score is 25.6. And here's the other traditional. They had better pre-test scores, but they didn't do as well on the end of the unit exam for the traditional lecture. And you can see the graph here. So much better work for the flipped guys. And this is interesting for all of the chemistry students. I put these guys on here. So you can see here, traditional lecture, ELL. This is the same information we saw on the last graph, but I added the non-ELLs, okay? And you can still see here, they had the flipped guys down here on the bottom, they had a marked improvement. They did much better than the traditional lecture guys. So it's just interesting to know. So discussion resulting action. Here we go. Examining the pre versus post-test comparison for the control groups, experimental group, we can see a much larger difference in the mean pre to post-test scores earned. Control group A increased 11.2 points, while the treatment group increased 22.7 points. So that's way better. Differentiating the curriculum by flipping the classroom may have provided adequate scaffolding to assist ELLs to increase understanding of the behaviors of gases. They were able to collaborate with peers in class and parents at home. That's one of the great things about flipping the classroom, because you can watch your videos at home. So the discussion here, by implementing culturally relevant teaching, which is basically providing multimedia instruction in the student's native language, which is awesome because YouTube, you can use YouTube to turn on the words, the teletype at the bottom, and it'll translate into Spanish. Sorry, I couldn't remember what that was. So the experimental group earned better scores than the control groups, easily. Students were able to watch videos at home, and they can watch them repeatedly, which is important, with their parents, which traditional lecturers can't. Students were able to watch videos. Oh, it's got that. Usually parents are unable to assist students with complexities of chemistry. However, bringing the classroom, the lecture materials, into the homes of the ELLs allows for the learning process to be a family affair. And that's one of the things that Professor Peng talked about in her science article. So even though not a part of this hypothesis, which is very interesting, the data shows that ELLs continue to score lower as compared to non-ELLs. And that goes back to my, my research where it says that it takes 1 to 7 years for an ELL to gain the academic knowledge or the vocabulary to even be able to learn science. And, some of my students cross the border every day to come to class. So it's really not fair. But in any case, the mean ELL score, both flipped and traditional, is lower than non-ELL. So I just wanted to point that out because it's really not, it doesn't seem fair to me. So. And they don't have the appropriate support at school. There's no translation assistance. There's nothing for these ELLs or these guys that cross the border but go to school here. This data supports the educational theory behind flipping the classroom for ELLs, but does not level the playing field for all students. It does not. And more research is needed to support this endeavor. But it was an amazing thing, and it really drove home the fact that flipping the classroom for chemistry, specifically chemistry, because it's so intense, is going to be a huge benefit for these guys, and I'm going to move forward with that. Here's all the references you can see, and that's it. So thank you very much. Stay safe and healthy. I appreciate your time.